Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So today is the next chapter of the Eternal Challenge, a journey to the miraculous Qur'an. And the title is What Are Its Main Themes? Side note, I do have food right now. This is not a mukbang channel, just hungry. So yeah, take a bite. Hopefully, won't be pausing too much, but it's delicious. So rice, lentils, and then soup that I made on top, chicken, veggies, some roasted chicken masala. Very delicious. Bismillah. Happy food dance. All right. What are its main themes? Belief in God Almighty. The essence of the Qur'an, monotheism, is captured in its 112th chapter. Say, He is God, the One, God the Eternal. He begot no one, nor was he begotten. No one is comparable to him. And this is actually Surah Ikhlas, and in Arabic, it's A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. Allahu samad. Lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad. You can think of this chapter of the Quran as the manifesto of monotheism in Islam. It tells us that God is one. There isn't one in the sense of one which can become two, and two which can become three, and so on. This is one, and uniquely one, that cannot become two. But how can we know that our Creator is one? Why can't there be two or three? We can come to this conclusion through reason, a gift given to us by God, which allows us to ponder and reflect on the universe around us and make conclusions about it. It is like when an art historian looks at a series of paintings without knowing the name of the painter, but can identify the artist who created them based on the signature style of the painting. So when it comes to our divine origins, what can we conclude based on the universe around us? It turns out that there is consistent design throughout nature. There are many repeating numbers, such as the Fibonacci sequence. This mathematical series of numbers has been described as nature's code. Fibonacci numbers reoccur over and over in many unrelated phenomena in nature. These numbers can be seen from the smallest of things to the largest, from biological systems to inanimate objects. A swirling pattern known as the golden circle, the golden spiral, is one example of a shape based on these numbers. So here's golden spiral right there. Examples in nature that exhibit this pattern include a snail's shell, the shape of galaxies, the swirling formation of hurricanes, flowers, and even our fingerprints. So you can see those right there. Snail, galaxy, hurricane, flowers, and a fingerprint. SubhanAllah. You can think of these patterns as a consistent design in nature, design signature. This consistent design signature is in nature shows the oneness of the Creator who made it all. Another example of consistent design throughout nature is DNA. DNA is genetic information which all living creatures carry in each of their cells. All genes in every living creature are coded messages for how to build the organism. You can think of them as blueprints. Even though living things may outwardly appear to be very different, At the genetic level, because of their shared creator, they can be very similar. For example, as humans, we share approximately 50% of our DNA with banana trees. What? Like we're part banana? That's crazy. We find that the DNA, the blueprint, is shared by all living things across nature. This common design points to a common designer, one creator behind it all. What would be the case if there were multiple gods, multiple creators? Bismillah. Polytheistic religions that believe in multiple gods, always portray these gods with distinct personalities. This is why the religions are filled with tales of disputes among the gods and their personalities clash. A good example is Hinduism, where the god Shiva is said to have cut the head off the god Ganesh and later replaced his head with an elephant's. Now that's an argument. If there were multiple gods, multiple creators, then this would be reflected in the reality of the world around us. The state of creation would likely be chaotic, and the blueprints across nature would surely differ. Each god, with its own distinct personality, would impose its own design on its own creations. If there were various gods who made the different things we see today, it would be reasonable to assume that even those things which look the same are very different at a microscopic level. Therefore, evidence in nature points us to the conclusion that there must rather be one creator. A critic may point out that things that are engineered are generally made by more than one creator. For example, cars. When it comes to the creation of cars, one person designs the engine, another person designs the braking system, and so on and so forth. Is this a valid argument? There may be a possibility of multiple designers or creators collaborating with one another in the human domain, as illustrated by the car example, but there cannot be more than one God in the domain of the divine. This is because when we think of God, we think of a divine being with a will. God does whatever he wills. In other words, God, by definition, is a being who has an unlimited, imposing will. For the sake of argument, what would be the situation if there were two gods and a conflict arose between them? Say they each wanted to move a rock in opposite directions. Since both their wills can't be enforced, there are only two possibilities. They agree to compromise and have the same will. This would mean that both their wills are now limited and passive, which would mean they are not gods anymore by definition. 2, one overpowers the other. It is this dominant God that is the true God. As you can see in this example, it is impossible to have multiple wills. The will of any God which is not realized cannot be considered God. This is the simplest and most logical explanation for the order and stability of the universe around us. There is only one unlimited, imposing will, one God, and he alone deserves our worship. Getting back to the chapter of the Qur'an, in the next verse, we are also told that God is eternal. God the eternal. So the first verse being, say, he is God, the one. Qul huwa Allahu ahad. The next one, God the eternal. Allahu samad. This means that God, he has no beginning and will never come to an end. A common question many people ask is, who created God? If we use reason, we come to the conclusion that God must be uncreated due to the absurdity of a never-ending chain of creators. To illustrate this better, if the creator of the universe had a creator, and that creator had a creator, and that creator had a creator, and so on and so forth, then we wouldn't have a universe. Imagine if you were told that you couldn't read this book until someone else read it before you. And that person also couldn't read it until someone else read it before them. And this went on forever. Would anyone have ever read this book? The answer is no. Now, if we apply this principle to the universe, then we would have to conclude that the creator behind it is uncreated and out of rational necessity. Because of the universe to be in existence, we could not have an infinite number of creators. We rather need one eternal creator. So the first two verses, Qul huwa Allahu Ahad, say he is God, the one, Allahu Samad, God the eternal. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begot. The next verse tells us that God does not have any children or parents. Lam yalid wa lam yulad. He begot no one, nor was he begotten. Why would a supreme God not have any children or parents? The final verse of the chapter answers this question. No one is comparable to him. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Everything within the creation has to reproduce in order for life to continue. In other words, we have offspring out of a need for survival. Some people have children for other reasons, such as wanting to be looked after when they become old and frail. This is also a need. But if God is unlike his creation, then he does not have any needs, and so he does not beget. Another point worth mentioning is the notion of the creator being distinct from the creation. For example, if a person were to create a chair or a table, then that person would not become the chair or table. We are distinct as disjoined from what we make. Similarly, God created the universe, and therefore the universe is distinct and disjoined from him. An interesting point is that the Qur'an says the belief in a creator is a natural state of all human beings. So, Prophet, as a man of pure faith, stand firm and true in your devotion to the religion. This is the natural position God instilled in mankind. There is, in fact, psychological, sociological, and anthropological evidence to support this notion. Oxford University psychologist Dr. Oliveira Petrovich, an expert in psychology of religion, conducted some studies concerning the psychology of the human being and God's existence. She discovered that infants are hardwired to believe in God, and atheism has to be learned. Professor Justin Barrett did some research by looking at the behavior and claims of children. He concluded that the children believed in what he calls natural religion. This is the idea that there is a personal being that created the entire universe. That being cannot be human. It must be divine and supernatural. And an excerpt from Justin Barrett. Scientific research on children's developing minds and supernatural beliefs suggests that children normally and rapidly acquire minds that facilitate belief in supernatural agents. Not long after their first birthday, babies appear to understand that agents, but not natural forces or ordinary objects, can create order out of disorder. Who is the creator? Children know people are not good candidates. It must have been a God. Children are born believers of what I call natural religion. Let's consider the atheism of communist Russia and communist China. Fun! The Soviet Union was the first state to have an ideological objective to eliminate religion and replace it with atheism. The vast majority of people in the Russian Empire were, at the time of the Communist Revolution, religious believers, whereas the communists aimed to break the power of all religions, of all religious institutions, and eventually replace religious belief with atheism. Toward that end, the communist regime confiscated church property, ridiculed religion, harassed believers, and propagated atheism in the schools. Criticism of atheism was strictly forbidden and sometimes led to imprisonment. In spite of this, atheists still had signs of what you would call a worship instinct, which relates to the natural state that the Qur'an speaks of. For example, their big statues of Stalin and Lenin were, not John Lennon, were almost revered. When you look at different cultures, you can see this worship instinct coming through. This instinct even manifests itself in atheist churches. Atheist cultures, sorry. Atheist churches would be a direct contradiction. Interesting. Okay. The fall of communism saw a rapid revival of religion, which is flourishing today in Russia. If belief in God is nothing more than an ideology, something that people are indoctrinated with by their parents, then shouldn't these efforts by the Communist Party over the space of several generations have undone religious convictions? All this evidence leads to one conclusion. Belief in God is not taught, but exists naturally within human beings. Therefore, when pondering God, the question shouldn't actually be, does God exist? But rather, what reasons do we have to reject his existence? Because God's existence is self-evidently true. I think this is really interesting that, especially in reflecting on the fact that kids have a natural inclination towards understanding and knowing God. Because I remember my first interaction in just becoming a conscious human being was with God. I was 4 and I was laying on the grass, staring up at the leaves and watching the wind blow through and how the leaves like glittered as the sun like went through, and the cool breeze, and just laying on soft cushy grass, like I knew, like deep, even though I didn't have words for it, that this has to be God. Like this has to be magic, some mystical being, some overriding force that created this beauty. And I was stunned and would lay in the grass for hours just watching the wind blow through the leaves and how the sun would glitter through all the different shades of green. And subhanallah, like this simple thing is like my first core memory. And Alhamdulillah, there's this wisdom in Islam of us being born Muslim and understanding exactly that Allah created us and to him is everything we owe, our sustaining, our life, and he's worthy of worship. And even as a child, like my first instinct was to be in awe and just thanking Allah for this beauty. And I would often touch trees and plants and grass and say hi. And like, just, it felt like I was connecting with Allah, with that force, with his will coming into being. Allahu Akbar. But yeah, so that's the next chapter of the Eternal Challenge, inshallah. Next time we'll do the following chapter, which is Stories of the Prophets and Past Nations. Inshallah. May Allah keep you happy, healthy, and safe. See you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Have a good one.